My name is Libby Marshall, and at 67 I thought I knew everything about protecting my family. When my son Samuel married Amanda, I welcomed her with open arms like the daughter I never had. Then, one summer afternoon, I overheard her whispering to a stranger in my garden. "I only married him for that old woman's 7 million. Just wait till I'm done with her." My heart shattered, but I stayed silent. Some betrayals require strategy, not tears. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, as I share how I turned the tables on the woman who tried to destroy my family. For 42 years I built a life with my husband James that felt like something out of a storybook, though we worked incredibly hard for everything we had. We started with practically nothing. James was fresh out of college with dreams of starting his own construction company, and I was finishing my residency to become a pediatrician. Our first apartment in Hartford was so small we could barely turn around without bumping into each other, but we were madly in love and determined to build something meaningful together. James worked 16-hour days, getting his company off the ground, taking any project he could find, while I cared for the children of Connecticut, sometimes working back-to-back shifts when the hospital was short-staffed. We saved every penny making our own meals, driving used cars, and celebrating anniversaries with homemade cards and walks along the riverfront rather than expensive gifts. 20 years into our marriage, James's company became one of the largest commercial builders in the Northeast. My private practice was thriving with a waitlist of patients. We finally moved into our dream home, a beautiful colonial on 3 acres in Greenwich, with enough room for family gatherings and the garden I'd always wanted. We weren't flashy people. Our wealth was quietly invested in property stocks and retirement accounts. James was meticulous about financial planning, always saying, "We're building this for Samuel's future." Samuel was our only child born after years of trying. He inherited his father's analytical mind and my compassionate heart. Growing up, he'd follow James around construction sites with a tiny hard hat, asking endless questions about load-bearing walls and foundation types. By high school, he was designing impressive structures on his computer. It surprised no one when he became an architect, though he chose to work for a prestigious firm rather than join his father's company. "I need to make my own way, Mom," he told me, and both James and I respected that. What Samuel had in professional success, he lacked in romance. He dated occasionally, but his reserved nature and dedication to his work made lasting relationships difficult. At 33, he seemed resigned to being single, telling me once, "Not everyone gets what you and Dad had, Mom." Then cancer took James quickly, just 3 months from diagnosis to the funeral. The grief was all-consuming, leaving Samuel and me to navigate our new reality. James left behind a significant estate worth $7 million, the product of a lifetime of hard work and smart investments. I made it clear to Samuel that it would all be his eventually, but he was more concerned with making sure I was all right living alone. The first 2 years after James died were a blur of grief and adjustment. I threw myself into volunteer work at the hospital and the garden that James had loved, while Samuel buried himself in complex architectural projects, often calling me late at night just to talk through a design problem or reminisce about his dad. Samuel was 35 when he met Amanda at a charity gala for the hospital where I volunteered. He'd only attended as my +1, reluctantly wearing the tuxedo I insisted he needed. Amanda was working the event, coordinating the silent auction with efficiency and charm. At 32, she was striking, tall with auburn hair and a smile that lit up her entire face. "Mom, this is Amanda Jenkins," Samuel said, actually blushing as he introduced us. "She's been keeping this whole event from falling apart." Hardly Amanda laughed, touching his arm in a way that made him stand up straighter. "Your son has been rescuing me all evening. He caught an error in the bidding system that would have been a disaster." By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers, and Samuel looked happier than I'd seen him since before his father died. Their first date turned into daily phone calls, which quickly became weekend trips and romantic getaways. Amanda was thoughtful, bringing me wildflower arrangements just because, and remembering small details about my preferences. She asked about James, often sitting with me through stories that made me both laugh and cry. "He sounds wonderful," she'd say, holding my hand. Samuel has so many of his qualities. 4 months into their relationship, Samuel called me, voice shaking with excitement. She said, "Yes, Mom. We're getting married." The wedding was small but elegant, held in the garden James had designed. Amanda insisted I help with every decision, from flowers to menu choices. "You have such wonderful taste, Libby," she'd say. "We want this day to honor James's memory too." I wept as I watched them exchange vows, feeling James's absence acutely, but also a profound gratitude that Samuel had found someone who seemed to love him completely. At the reception, Amanda hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for raising such a wonderful man. I promise to make him happy every day." After a honeymoon in Greece, they settled into Samuel's downtown apartment, though Amanda quickly began suggesting they find something larger. "We want to start a family soon," she confided to me over lunch. "And we'd love to have space for you to stay with us sometimes too." Our Sunday dinners became a sacred tradition. Amanda was an enthusiastic cook, always trying new recipes that she knew Samuel would love. She'd ask me endless questions about his childhood, his favorite toys, the funny things he said as a toddler. She seemed genuinely interested in our family history. As the months passed, Amanda began asking subtle questions about finances. At first they seemed natural, discussions about retirement planning or investment strategies that came up organically in conversation. "James was so smart with money," she remarked once, as we looked through old photo albums. "Samuel says all your financial security came from his planning." "We both worked hard," I said. "But yes, James had a gift for seeing the long view." "It's wonderful that you're so secure now," she said, squeezing my hand. "Samuel worries about you, but I tell him you've got everything figured out." Gradually, I began sharing more details about our financial situation, explaining how James had structured things, and my plans to eventually leave everything to Samuel. Amanda listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. Our first Thanksgiving and Christmas together were magical. Amanda decorated both houses, beautifully took countless photos, and created traditions that blended old and new. She insisted on using my recipes, saying, "These mean so much to Samuel. They're part of your family history." Looking back, I can see how perfectly she played the role of devoted wife and daughter-in-law. At the time, all I felt was profound relief and joy that my son had found someone who seemed to complete our family circle again. I truly believed Amanda was the daughter I never had, and I thanked James in my prayers for sending her to us after he was gone. The first change I noticed came after their first wedding anniversary. Nothing dramatic, just subtle shifts in Amanda's behavior that seemed off somehow. During our Sunday dinners, she began checking her phone constantly, something she'd never done before. When Samuel spoke about his work projects, her eyes would glaze over slightly before she'd catch herself and re-engage with an enthusiasm that felt forced. She remained perfectly pleasant to me, but the thoughtful little gifts and spontaneous visits became less frequent. When I'd stop by their apartment, she seemed eager for me to leave, checking her watch and mentioning other commitments. "We should do lunch this week, just us girls," she'd say, but somehow those lunches were repeatedly postponed due to her suddenly busy schedule. Samuel didn't seem to notice these changes. He was working longer hours, taking on additional projects that kept him at the office until late evening. "The firm is pushing for partner track," he explained when I asked about his exhaustion. "It's temporary, Mom." Around this time, Amanda began a series of expensive renovations to their apartment despite Samuel's gentle suggestions that they might want to wait. "Life is too short to live with outdated bathrooms," she'd laugh, dismissing his concerns. "Besides, it increases the property value." I noticed her shopping bags multiplying, designer labels, and luxury brands that seemed excessive for their lifestyle. When I complimented a new handbag, Amanda casually mentioned it was just a little something she'd picked up, though I later discovered from Samuel it had cost nearly $3,000. "We're doing fine financially, Mom," he assured me when I carefully broached the subject. "Amanda has expensive taste, but she works hard too." Indeed, she had taken a position as an event coordinator for a luxury hotel chain, though her hours seemed surprisingly flexible. 6 months into their second year of marriage, Amanda began suggesting I consider moving to a retirement community. "There's a beautiful one in Westport," she mentioned during dinner. "It has everything: social activities, medical care on site. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house alone. I'm perfectly capable of managing my home, I replied, surprised by the suggestion. James and I built this place together. I'm not ready to leave it. Of course, Amanda smiled, though something flickered in her eyes. We just worry about you rattling around in this big place by yourself. Don't we, Samuel? My son looked uncomfortable. Mom knows we're here if she needs anything, he said diplomatically. After that conversation, I began noticing how differently Amanda behaved when Samuel wasn't present. If he stepped out of the room during our gatherings, her warm smile would fade, replaced by an impatient expression as she checked her phone or examined her nails. The moment he returned, her animated, caring persona snapped back into place, so convincingly that I questioned my own perceptions. Amanda also began bringing new friends to family gatherings, people I'd never met who seemed oddly uncomfortable around me. There was a woman named Jessica, who barely made eye contact, and a couple, Diane and Robert, who exchanged glances whenever Amanda talked about future plans for our family home. They're colleagues from the hotel, Amanda explained vaguely when I asked about them. It's good for Samuel to expand his social circle beyond just architects. I tried to dismiss my growing unease. After all, relationships evolve, and perhaps I was being overprotective or worse, imagining problems because I missed the way things used to be. James always said I had a tendency to worry too much about Samuel. You've got to let him make his own mistakes, Libby, he'd tell me gently. That's how he'll learn. So, I pushed aside my concerns and focused instead on the positives, and how Samuel's firm had just promoted him, how Amanda organized a beautiful surprise party for his promotion, how they still held hands when they thought no one was looking. But I couldn't ignore Samuel's increasing stress. The dark circles under his eyes deepened, and he'd grown noticeably thinner. When I prepared his favorite childhood meals, he'd barely eat, claiming he wasn't hungry. During a rare moment alone together, as we cleaned up after dinner, I finally asked directly, "Is everything all right financially? You seem worried." Samuel sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my heart ache. "It's tighter than I'd like, Mom. Amanda has big dreams for us, and sometimes it's hard to keep up. But we're managing." "You know I can help," I offered. "Your father left us well provided for." "I couldn't take your money," he said firmly. But the next week Amanda called me. "Samuel's too proud to ask," she said, her voice concerned. "But we've had some unexpected expenses with the apartment renovations. Just a temporary cash flow issue. I hate to even mention it." I immediately offered to help transferring $20,000 to their account that afternoon. Samuel called me later, a mix of gratitude and embarrassment in his voice. "Thank you, Mom. We'll pay you back soon." "Don't be silly," I told him. "That's what family is for." What I didn't tell him was that 3 of my closest friends had separately expressed concerns about Amanda. My friend Dorothy, who'd known Samuel since he was born, pulled me aside at her birthday lunch. "Libby, does Amanda always spend like this?" she asked quietly, after describing running into my daughter-in-law at Saks Fifth Avenue with multiple shopping bags. "They're doing well," I defended automatically. "Samuel's career is taking off." Dorothy patted my hand. "Of course, dear. I'm sure everything is fine." But her concerned expression stayed with me, joining the growing collection of small moments that didn't quite add up. Still, I told myself I was being unfair. After all, Amanda made my son happy. Wasn't that what mattered most? Samuel's 36th birthday fell on a perfect June Saturday, and I insisted on hosting a garden party at my home. "Let me do this for you both," I told them. James would have wanted to celebrate properly. Amanda agreed enthusiastically, but quickly took over the planning. "Don't worry about a thing, Libby. I'll handle everything. You just enjoy being the hostess." What started as a small family gathering somehow expanded into an event for nearly 50 people, many of whom I'd never met. Amanda hired caterers despite my protests that I wanted to cook Samuel's favorite foods, and arranged for a bartender to serve signature cocktails. "It's Samuel's big day," she said, when I expressed concern about the growing guest list. "We want to celebrate him properly." By the time the party began, I hardly recognized my own backyard. Amanda had transformed it with rented furniture, elaborate floral arrangements, and a small stage for a jazz trio I hadn't approved. Samuel seemed equally surprised by the scale of the event, but smiled good-naturedly as Amanda led him around to greet guests. I found myself sidelined at my own home, introduced as Samuel's mother to people who barely acknowledged me before continuing their conversations. Many guests seemed more like Amanda's friends or business connections than people with any real connection to my son. "Quite the extravaganza," commented my neighbor George, who had known our family for decades. "James would have hated every minute of this show." "It makes Samuel happy," I said automatically though. Looking across the lawn at my son's slightly strained smile, I wasn't entirely convinced. Midway through the afternoon, I realized I hadn't seen Amanda for nearly 30 minutes. Thinking she might need help with something, I went searching through the house. A catering staff member mentioned seeing her heading toward the guest house, a small cottage at the far end of the property where James had kept his home office. As I approached the guest house, I heard voices through the partially open window. Amanda's distinctive laugh floated out, followed by a male voice I didn't recognize. I paused, not wanting to interrupt if she was in the middle of party business. He has no idea Amanda was saying her voice different somehow, harder and more clipped than her usual warm tones. Honestly, it's almost too easy. "What about the old lady?" the man asked. "She seems sharp." Libby. Amanda laughed again, the sound sending a chill through me. "She's so desperate to believe I love her precious son that she'd believe anything. I only married him for that old woman's $7 million. Just wait till I'm done with her." I froze, certain I'd misheard, but Amanda continued. "The plan is working perfectly. Samuel's going to suggest getting power of attorney for her protection next month. I've been planting the idea that she's becoming forgetful. Once we control the accounts, we can start moving money gradually. She'll never notice." "And Samuel?" the man asked. "He's so trusting, it's almost sad," Amanda replied. "Anyway, once I have access to the money, I'll file for divorce. New York is an equitable distribution state. I'll walk away with at least half of everything plus whatever we've already moved." "Smart girl," the man said admiringly. "Tyler's been patient, but he's ready for you to wrap this up. Tell him another 6 months tops. We'll have our beach house in Malibu just like we planned." My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the side of the building for support, feeling physically ill. Tyler, that must be someone from her past, someone she was still involved with. The entire marriage was a sham, a calculated plan to steal the legacy James had worked his entire life to build. I heard movement inside and quickly moved away, heart pounding so loudly I was certain they would hear it. Somehow I made it back to the main garden, finding a quiet corner to sit down before my shaking legs betrayed me. For the remainder of the party, I watched Amanda with new eyes. The way she touched Samuel's arm possessively when introducing him to her friends. The secret glances she exchanged with a tall, dark-haired man I now recognized as the voice from the guest house. The practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes when she hugged me for photos. How had I not seen it before? The careful questions about finances, the push for me to move out of my home, the gradual isolation of Samuel from his old friends. Each moment of the past 2 years replayed in my mind with horrifying clarity. Worst of all was watching my son, my kind, brilliant boy, looking at Amanda with complete adoration. He had no idea the woman he loved was planning to destroy him, to use him as a pawn to steal his inheritance and abandon him. As guests began to leave, Amanda found me sitting alone. "Are you feeling all right, Libby? You look pale." Her concern seemed so genuine that for a moment I almost doubted what I'd heard. "Just tired," I managed to say. "It was a lovely party." "You should rest," she said, patting my hand in a gesture that now felt patronizing rather than affectionate. "Samuel and I will handle the cleanup. We worry about you overdoing it." That night after they'd gone home, I sat in James's study surrounded by photos of our life together. "What do I do?" I whispered to his image. "How do I tell our son that the woman he loves is using him?" The thought of Samuel's face when he learned the truth was almost unbearable. He'd already lost his father. How could I be the one to shatter his heart again? But the alternative, Watching Amanda systematically dismantle everything James and I had built while destroying our son in the process was unthinkable. By morning, I knew one thing clearly: I couldn't react emotionally. Amanda was calculating and clever. If I confronted her directly, or told Samuel without proof, she would deny everything, paint me as a jealous, confused old woman, and accelerate her plans. No, if I wanted to protect my son and our family legacy, I needed to be smarter than Amanda. I needed irrefutable evidence and a strategy that would expose her true nature without leaving any room for manipulation or denial. As painful as it would be, I had to keep my discovery secret while I gathered what I needed. I had to continue welcoming the woman who planned to destroy us into my home, pretending I still trusted her completely. James had always said I was stronger than I knew. It was time to prove him right. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned Amanda's cold words replaying in my mind. I only married him for that old woman's $7 million. By dawn, I'd made a decision: I wouldn't confront her with only overheard conversations as evidence. I needed concrete proof that would be impossible for her to deny, and that would make Samuel see the truth, however painful. After decades as a pediatrician, I'd developed a methodical approach to solving problems. I started by making a list of what I knew versus what I needed to prove. I knew Amanda was planning to gain control of my finances, that she was still involved with someone named Tyler, and that she intended to divorce Samuel once she had secured enough money. What I didn't know was her background, who this Tyler person was, or how far along her plans had progressed. My first call was to my bank. I spoke with Margaret Collins, the branch manager, who had handled our accounts since James was alive. "I'd like to review recent account activity and change my security protocols," I explained. "And I need absolute discretion on this, Margaret. No discussions with anyone, including my son or daughter-in-law." "Of course, Dr. Marshall," she assured me. "Is everything all right?" "Just being cautious," I said, unwilling to share my suspicions until I had proof. After securing my accounts with new passwords and additional verification steps, I faced my next challenge: finding someone who could investigate Amanda's background professionally. I needed an experienced private investigator, but how does a 67-year-old retired pediatrician find such a person? The answer came from an unexpected source. My friend Eleanor's son was a detective with the Greenwich Police Department. One carefully worded lunch conversation. Later, I had the name of Julia Washington, a former FBI agent who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in financial fraud cases. Julia was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened to my story without judgment in the private room of a cafe 20 miles from my home. "You're right to be cautious," she told me, after I'd shared what I'd overheard. "If your daughter-in-law is running a long con, confronting her without evidence would only make her more dangerous." "Can you help me?" I asked. Julia nodded. "I'll need a retainer to start, and this type of investigation typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. The cost was substantial, $15,000, but I didn't hesitate. "I want everything you can find. Her real background, her relationship history, any criminal records, and especially anything about this Tyler person." Over the next 3 weeks, I maintained a careful facade. I continued our Sunday dinners, listened to Amanda's increasingly frequent suggestions about retirement communities, and pretended not to notice when she casually mentioned how complicated estate management could be for someone at my age. "Samuel and I just want to make sure you're protected," she said, during one such conversation, reaching for my hand across the table. "You shouldn't have to worry about these complex financial matters." "That's thoughtful," I replied, forcing a smile while my stomach churned. "But James set everything up quite efficiently. I'm managing just fine." Meanwhile, Julia was uncovering a story very different from the one Amanda had told us. According to her investigation, Amanda Jenkins was born Amanda Carrington in a small town in Nevada. She'd changed her name after her first divorce at age 23. That marriage had lasted exactly 2 years, coincidentally the length of time it took for the divorce to provide maximum financial benefit in Nevada. Her second marriage was to a real estate developer 30 years her senior. That relationship ended after 3 years when he discovered unauthorized charges on his accounts. No charges were filed, but the divorce settlement was minimal, sealed by a confidentiality agreement. Most disturbing was the discovery of Tyler Brooks, Amanda's long-term boyfriend, who had a record of minor fraud charges and was currently working as a bartender in Los Angeles. Phone records showed regular communication between them, often immediately after Amanda told Samuel she was calling her mother. "They have a pattern," Julia explained, as she presented her findings. "Amanda targets wealthy men, preferably those with older parents or recent inheritances. Tyler stays in the background until she secures the money, then they move on together. They've never been charged, but they've left a trail of financial and emotional destruction." The file Julia compiled was comprehensive photographs of Amanda, with Tyler taken just 2 months before she met Samuel, credit checks showing mounting debt in Samuel's name that I was certain he knew nothing about, and most damning, recordings of phone calls between Amanda and Tyler, discussing their plans in detail. "Is this enough?" I asked, my hands shaking as I closed the file. "It's substantial," Julia confirmed. "But I recommend we also look into your son's accounts and any legal documents Amanda may have been preparing." With Julia's help, I discovered Amanda had been researching elder law attorneys, specifically those specializing in conservatorship and power of attorney cases. She'd even drafted emails to several firms inquiring about the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent. The final piece came when Julia's team found credit card statements showing Amanda had been furnishing a small apartment in Manhattan, a place Samuel knew nothing about, paid for, with a credit card in his name, that had been opened 6 months earlier. As the evidence mounted, my initial shock transformed into cold anger. This woman had entered our lives with the calculated intention of destroying everything James and I had built, using our son as nothing more than access to our money. She'd smiled at me across countless dinner tables while planning to declare me incompetent. She'd accepted my help, my love, my trust, all while plotting with her real partner to steal everything once she'd finished manipulating Samuel. With the file complete, I called Michael Sullivan, the attorney who had handled our family's legal matters for 30 years. Michael had been James's roommate in college and had stood beside us through every major life event since. If anyone would help me navigate this situation legally, and with Samuel's best interests at heart, it was Michael. I brought the entire file to his office, watching his expression grow increasingly grave as he reviewed the evidence. "Libby, this is extensive and disturbing," he said finally. "You've been very smart not to confront her directly." "I need to protect Samuel," I said simply. "Not just financially, but from being blindsided by this betrayal. How do I do that?" Michael thought carefully. "If we move too aggressively, she'll either accelerate her plans or disappear with what she's already taken. We need to create a situation where she reveals herself while simultaneously protecting your assets." Together we crafted a strategy. First, Michael helped me establish a new trust that would protect the bulk of my assets while appearing to leave them vulnerable in exactly the way Amanda was expecting. Second, we documented all unauthorized accounts and charges in Samuel's name, preparing identity theft reports that could be filed immediately if necessary. Finally, and most painfully, we discussed how to present this to Samuel in a way that would make the truth undeniable while giving him the support he would need. "He's going to be devastated," I said, my voice breaking for the first time since this began. "He genuinely loves her." Michael reached across his desk to squeeze my hand. "Samuel is James's son. He has that same core of strength. He'll get through this, Libby, and he has you." With our plan in place, I returned home to prepare for the most difficult performance of my life. I needed to play into Amanda's hands just enough to make her believe her plan was working while setting the stage for her ultimate exposure. The next morning, when Samuel called to check in, I deliberately let my voice sound fragile and confused. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked immediately. "Just a bit tired, dear. I was looking for my checkbook all morning and can't seem to find it. This was completely fabricated. I knew exactly where my checkbook was." "Do you want me to come over and help look?" No. I'm sure it will turn up." "Oh, by the way, what's the name of that retirement community Amanda mentioned? I've been thinking maybe it makes sense to look into it." The hopeful tone in Samuel's voice when he relayed this conversation to Amanda that evening must have been exactly what she was waiting for. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully played the role Amanda expected, a gradually declining older woman who might be ready to relinquish control of her finances. I occasionally misplaced items when she was visiting, asked Samuel to repeat information I'd forgotten, and mentioned how overwhelming it was to manage the house and finances alone. "You know," I said during one Sunday dinner, deliberately keeping my voice tentative, "I've been thinking about what you both said regarding the retirement community. Perhaps I should consider something smaller." Amanda's eyes lit up with poorly concealed excitement. "Really? That's wonderful, Libby. I think you'd be so much happier somewhere designed for your needs." "We just want what's best for you, Mom," Samuel added, though I noted he seemed less enthusiastic than his wife. "The house does feel too large sometimes," I continued. "And the financial management, your father handled so much of it. It gets complicated." Amanda was quick to seize the opening. "You shouldn't have to worry about complex financial matters at this stage of life. Samuel and I could help oversee things, give you peace of mind." "Perhaps," I murmured, glancing down, as if considering the idea for the first time. It might be a relief to share that burden. The change in Amanda's behavior was immediate and dramatic. She began calling daily to check on me, bringing over brochures for senior living communities and offering to help organize my paperwork. During these visits, I noticed her carefully scanning my desk for financial documents, even taking photos of my mail when she thought I wasn't looking. Meanwhile, Michael and I continued implementing our plan. We worked with Margaret at the bank to create a convincing but controlled scenario. I transferred a significant portion of my assets, $3 million, into a new trust with very specific conditions that would become clear at the right moment. The remaining funds were secured in accounts that appeared normal, but had special monitoring and restrictions in place. "We flagged all your accounts," Margaret assured me. "Any unusual activity will trigger immediate notifications, and no major transfers can occur without multiple verifications." Julia continued her surveillance, documenting increased communication between Amanda and Tyler. Their conversations had taken on a more urgent tone, with Tyler pushing for faster action and Amanda assuring him that things were finally moving forward. Most disturbing was the discovery that Amanda had begun researching one-way flights to Los Angeles and rental properties in Malibu, clear evidence that she was preparing her exit strategy. The most difficult part of this period was maintaining my composure around Samuel. Each time he expressed concern about my well-being or gratitude for Amanda's increased attentiveness, I felt a stab of pain, knowing how deeply he would be hurt when the truth emerged. He had built dreams around this marriage. Hopes for children, a shared future, a continued family legacy. All of it was built on Amanda's elaborate deception. 18 days after I'd begun my act, Amanda made her move. She called to invite me to lunch, just the two of us, at an upscale restaurant I'd always enjoyed. "I thought we could have some quality time," she said warmly. "Samuel's been so busy with work and we haven't had our girl time lately." Over expertly prepared salmon and white wine, Amanda was the picture of daughterly concern. She asked about my health, reminisced about James, and gradually steered the conversation toward my finances. "Samuel mentioned you've been feeling overwhelmed with managing everything," she said, her voice gentle. "That's completely understandable, Libby. Financial management is complex, even for professionals." James made it seem so effortless. I sighed, playing my part. "Sometimes I worry I'm missing something important." Amanda reached across the table to pat my hand. "That's why family helps family. Samuel and I have been talking, and we think we have a solution that would give you peace of mind while ensuring everything is properly managed." "Oh," I kept my expression mildly curious. "We'd like to suggest setting up a family meeting with your financial advisors. Samuel could take on power of attorney for financial matters, so you wouldn't have to worry about any of it. You'd be free to enjoy your retirement without these stresses." The moment had arrived. I took a careful sip of water before responding. "That's very thoughtful, Amanda. Perhaps we should discuss it further. Would you and Samuel be available to meet at my bank on Friday? I'd feel more comfortable having Margaret there, since she's familiar with all our accounts." Amanda's smile widened. "That's perfect, Libby. I'll make sure Samuel clears his schedule. Shall we say 11 o'clock? I'll arrange everything with Margaret." As Amanda drove me home, I could almost feel her excitement radiating through the car. In her mind, she was just days away from accessing millions of dollars. Little did she know that every element of this meeting had been carefully orchestrated to reveal her true intentions. That evening, I called Samuel directly, something I'd been careful to do less frequently as part of my performance. "Mom, how was lunch with Amanda?" he asked. "Lovely," I replied. "We've arranged a meeting at the bank on Friday to discuss some financial planning. It's time I updated a few things." She mentioned that. "I think it's a good idea, Mom. You shouldn't have to manage everything alone." There was such genuine concern in his voice that I nearly broke down. Instead, I simply said, "I love you, Samuel. You know that, right?" "Of course I do. Are you okay?" "Just grateful for you," I told him truthfully. "I'll see you Friday." After hanging up, I called Michael to confirm our final preparations. "Everything is in place," he assured me. "Margaret has the documents ready, and I'll be there as planned." "And the bank officer, Thomas Reed from Fraud Prevention, will be present, along with the documentation we discussed." As Friday approached, Julia reported that Amanda's communications with Tyler had reached a fever pitch. She'd withdrawn $5,000 in cash from one of the credit cards in Samuel's name and made arrangements to meet Tyler in Manhattan the following week. "She believes she's about to gain access to your accounts," Julia told me. "She's accelerating all her plans." The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Not from fear or uncertainty, those emotions had been replaced by a steely resolve. Amanda had targeted the wrong family. She had underestimated a mother's determination to protect her child and a widow's commitment to preserving her husband's legacy. As dawn broke on Friday morning, I dressed carefully in a suit James had always admired, clasped the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 40th anniversary, and prepared to reclaim our family's future from the woman who thought she had outsmarted us all. Friday morning arrived with a clarity that only comes from absolute certainty. As I drove to the bank, I felt James's presence beside me, giving me strength for what was to come. I arrived early, meeting briefly with Margaret Michael and Thomas Reed from the Fraud Prevention Department to ensure every detail was in place. "Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed?" Michael asked, his concern evident. "This will be painful for Samuel." "The longer the deception continues, the more painful it will become," I replied. "Samuel deserves the truth, however difficult." At precisely 11 o'clock, Samuel and Amanda arrived together. Amanda was impeccably dressed in a conservative blue suit that screamed trustworthiness, while Samuel looked slightly confused but supportive beside her. "Mom, you look wonderful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Thank you for arranging this, Libby," Amanda added, squeezing my hand with what appeared to be genuine affection. "It's going to make everything so much easier for you." Margaret led us to the bank's conference room where Michael was waiting. Amanda's smile faltered slightly at the sight of our family attorney. "Michael, I didn't realize you'd be joining us," she said, recovering quickly. "How lovely to have everyone here to support Libby." "I never make major financial decisions without Michael," I explained. "James would insist on it." We settled around the polished table, Margaret at one end with a folder of documents, Michael beside me, and Samuel and Amanda across from us. Thomas Reed sat quietly in the corner, his presence explained as standard for meetings of this nature. Margaret began by reviewing my accounts in general terms, the approximate value of my estate, the structure of investments, and the properties I owned. I watched Amanda's eyes widen slightly at the confirmation of just how substantial James's legacy was. "As you know," Margaret continued, "Dr. Marshall has been considering simplifying her financial management as she enjoys her retirement years. That's the purpose of our meeting today." "Exactly," Amanda interjected smoothly. "Samuel and I have been discussing how he could take on power of attorney to relieve Libby of these burdens." "Actually," I said calmly, "I've already made some changes I'd like to share with you both." Margaret slid a document across the table. "Dr. Marshall has established a new trust that now holds the majority of her assets." Samuel looked surprised but not concerned. Amanda's perfectly manicured hand trembled slightly as she reached for the document. "A trust?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "When did you do this, Libby?" "Recently," I replied. "I've been thinking a great deal about legacy and protection." Margaret continued. The Marshall Family Trust has specific terms regarding disbursement and management. Perhaps Dr. Marshall would like to explain them. All eyes turned to me. The moment had arrived. I took a deep breath and looked directly at my son. Samuel, this trust holds approximately $3 million in assets. You are the primary beneficiary with specific conditions. Samuel nodded, still looking slightly confused, but trusting. The first condition, I continued, my voice steady, is that Amanda will never under any circumstances have access to any funds from this trust, either as your wife or in the event of your death. The room went completely silent. Amanda's face froze in a mask of shock before she recovered, forcing a laugh. Libby, what are you saying? That sounds so harsh. Samuel was staring at me, bewildered. Mom, why would you specify something like that? Instead of answering directly, I nodded to Thomas Reed, who placed a different folder on the table. Mr. Marshall, these are credit card statements for accounts opened in your name without your knowledge or consent. There are currently 5 such accounts, with a combined debt of nearly $137,000. That's impossible, Samuel said, reaching for the documents. I only have 2 credit cards. As he reviewed the statements, his face paled. These are from stores I've never shopped, at restaurants I've never visited. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, I said gently. Amanda opened these accounts using your social security number and identification details. Amanda's composure finally cracked. That's absurd, Samuel. Your mother is confused. These must be mistakes in the bank system. Michael slid another document forward. This is a lease agreement for an apartment on East 75th Street in Manhattan, signed 4 months ago. The rent is being paid by one of those unauthorized credit cards. Samuel looked at Amanda, genuine confusion in his eyes. Do you know anything about this? Before she could respond, I signaled to Margaret, who activated a small recorder. The unmistakable sound of Amanda's voice filled the room. He has no idea. Once I have access to the money, I'll file for divorce. I'll walk away with at least half of everything, plus whatever we've already moved. A male voice responded. Smart girl. Tyler's been patient, but he's ready for you to wrap this up. Tell him another 6 months tops. We'll have our beach house in Malibu just like we planned. The color drained from Samuel's face as he recognized his wife's voice. Amanda jumped to her feet. This is a setup. You've doctored that recording. Samuel, you can't possibly believe this. There's more, I said quietly, nodding to Michael, who opened the comprehensive file Julia had prepared. These are records of your communication with Tyler Brooks over the past 2 years, including during your honeymoon. Michael explained, his tone professional but compassionate as he looked at Samuel. There are photographs, phone records, and documented meetings in Manhattan. Samuel sat completely still, staring at the evidence accumulating before him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Is it true? Amanda's strategy shifted instantly. Her face softened as she reached for Samuel's hand. Darling, your mother has clearly lost touch with reality. She's fabricated this elaborate conspiracy because she can't bear to see you happy with someone else. She needs help, not encouragement. For a terrible moment, I saw doubt flicker in my son's eyes, not about Amanda's guilt, but about proceeding with this painful confrontation. I recognized his instinct to protect everyone, to find a solution that would minimize hurt all around. It was one of his most admirable qualities, but also his greatest vulnerability. Before he could speak, Thomas Reed placed one final document on the table, a draft email from Amanda to an elder law attorney, inquiring about having me declared mentally incompetent, dated just 3 weeks earlier. Samuel read it silently, then looked up at his wife with an expression of complete devastation. You were going to have my mother declared incompetent. Amanda's mask finally shattered completely. Her face transformed, the warmth and compassion replaced by cold calculation. You have no idea what it's been like, she hissed, abandoning all pretense. Playing the devoted wife to a man who spends his life obsessing over buildings, listening to endless stories about your father, the saint, pretending to care about your mother's garden and charity work. Samuel flinched as if physically struck. So it was all a lie. Everything. Not at first, Amanda said, suddenly strategic again. But then I realized what I was worth. Tyler and I have plans, real plans, not this suffocating family fantasy you live in. Tyler Samuel repeated the name, clearly familiar from the recording but still incomprehensible in this context. My actual partner, Amanda, snapped, gathering her purse. Someone with ambition and vision, not just his mother's puppet. She turned to me, all pretense abandoned. You think you're so clever, Libby. But this changes nothing. We're still married. In this state, I'm entitled to half of everything Samuel has. Your precious trust won't protect him. Michael cleared his throat. Actually, Miss Jenkins, or should I say Miss Carrington, there are several issues with that assessment. First, the evidence of fraud and identity theft constitutes criminal activity that will significantly impact any divorce proceedings. Second, the trust explicitly protects against this scenario with clear documentation of separate property. As if on cue, Amanda's phone rang. She glanced at it, her expression changing to alarm as she answered. What? That's impossible. I made the minimum payment last week. She listened, her face growing increasingly pale. No, you can't close the accounts. I need more time. After disconnecting, she glared at me. What did you do? As the actual owner of those credit cards, Samuel has reported them as fraudulent, I explained calmly. The accounts have been frozen and are under investigation. You'll regret this, she threatened, gathering her things. Both of you. As she moved toward the door, Samuel finally spoke again. Was any of it real? Amanda, did you ever love me at all? For a brief moment, something that might have been regret flickered across her face. Then it hardened once more. You were a means to an end, Samuel, nothing more. With that, she walked out the door, closing firmly behind her. The silence she left behind was deafening. Samuel sat motionless, staring at the scattered evidence of his wife's betrayal. Then, to my surprise, he began methodically gathering the documents, stacking them neatly, as if bringing order to this small corner might somehow restore order to his shattered world. I'm so sorry, I said, finally reaching across the table. Samuel, How long have you known? He interrupted, his voice hollow. 3 weeks. Since your birthday party. He nodded slowly. And you've been pretending all this time? Playing along with her game? I needed proof that you couldn't deny. I needed to protect you completely. Samuel's eyes, so like his father's, finally met mine. I should have seen it. There were signs, weren't there? Things that didn't quite add up. She was very convincing, Michael interjected gently. This wasn't your fault, Samuel. My son's composure finally broke. His shoulders slumped as he covered his face with his hands. I brought her into our lives. I let her get close to you, to everything Dad built. I was so completely fooled. I moved around the table to sit beside him, putting my arm around his shoulders, as I had when he was a child. Being deceived doesn't make you weak, Samuel. It makes you human. As he leaned against me, I felt the weight of his grief and humiliation, but beneath it I sensed something else, the core of strength and integrity that James and I had always known was there. What happens now? He asked finally. Now, I said firmly, we begin to rebuild. The weeks following Amanda's exposure were among the most difficult our family had faced. Samuel moved temporarily into my home, unable to bear returning to the apartment filled with memories of his fraudulent marriage. Michael handled the divorce proceedings, building an airtight case based on the evidence of Amanda's deception and financial crimes. She won't contest it, Michael assured us. The alternative would be criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. She's cutting her losses. Indeed, Amanda disappeared from Connecticut almost immediately, though Julia's contacts confirmed she had rejoined Tyler in Los Angeles. They attempted to establish themselves in Malibu, but without the millions they had counted on, their lifestyle quickly proved unsustainable. For Samuel, the pain ran deep. Beyond the humiliation of being deceived so completely was the grief of losing the future he had imagined, the children he hoped to have, the partnership. He thought he'd found the continuation of the family legacy James had established. I keep replaying every moment he confessed one evening as we sat in the garden. Looking for clues, I missed things I should have questioned. We see what we expect to see, I told him gently. You expected honesty because that's who you are. Slowly, Samuel began to rebuild his life. He threw himself into his work, finding solace in the concrete certainty of architectural principles. His firm, recognizing his need for a fresh start, assigned him to a major hospital project that required his full attention and creativity. As for me, I faced my own reckoning. Though I had protected our financial legacy, I questioned whether I could have spared Samuel some pain by recognizing Amanda's true nature earlier. You can't blame yourself for trusting her, my friend, Dorothy insisted during one of our regular lunches. She fooled all of us. Rather than dwelling on regrets, I decided to channel my energy into something positive. Working with Michael, I established a foundation to support victims of financial exploitation, particularly seniors targeted by similar schemes. The irony that Amanda's attempt to steal our legacy had instead created a resource to help others brought me a measure of satisfaction. 4 months after the confrontation at the bank, Samuel received notice that his divorce was final. That evening, we opened a bottle of James's favorite wine and sat together in the study surrounded by family photographs. I was thinking, Samuel said, swirling the burgundy liquid in his glass, about what Dad would say about all this. He'd be furious that someone tried to take advantage of us, I replied honestly, but mostly, he'd be proud of how you've handled it. Samuel looked surprised. Proud, Mom? I was completely duped. And when you learned the truth, you faced it with dignity. You didn't let bitterness consume you. You're rebuilding, focusing on work that matters. That's what would make him proud. My son's eyes glistened in the soft light. I keep wondering if I'll ever trust anyone again. You will, I assured him. Not blindly, perhaps, but with time you'll remember that most people aren't Amanda. Over the following months, Samuel gradually rejoined the world. He reconnected with old friends he'd neglected during his marriage, joined a recreational soccer league, and even began mentoring young architects at a community college. 6 months after the divorce, we received unexpected news. Amanda and Tyler had attempted a similar scheme with a wealthy businessman in California, but their history had caught up with them. Both were facing charges of fraud and identity theft. Do you want to follow the case? I asked Samuel when I shared the news. He shook his head. I'm ready to close that chapter completely. As the 1-year anniversary of our confrontation with Amanda approached, Samuel surprised me with an architectural rendering of a beautiful, secure apartment complex designed specifically for seniors. It's my newest project, he explained. Affordable, community-oriented living spaces with built-in financial protection services and legal support. The first building breaks ground next month in Hartford. I studied the thoughtful design, recognizing how he had transformed his painful experience into something that would protect others. Dad always said that the measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they rise afterward, Samuel continued. I think I finally understand what he meant. That night, as I sat alone in the garden James had planted, I reflected on the wisdom our difficult journey had revealed. True strength often emerges not from avoiding pain, but from moving through it with integrity. Real security comes not just from protecting our assets, but from knowing who we can genuinely trust. And sometimes the most devastating betrayals can ultimately lead us to greater authenticity and purpose. I had learned to balance trust with awareness, to recognize that being cautious isn't the same as being closed-hearted. Most importantly, I'd discovered that the legacy James and I created wasn't primarily financial. It was the values we'd instilled in our son, values that had guided him through his darkest time back into the light. 2 years after Amanda walked out of our lives, Samuel met Catherine, a pediatric surgeon, whose kindness and integrity shone through in every interaction. I watched their relationship develop slowly, built on honest communication and shared values rather than whirlwind romance. She's different, Mom, Samuel told me, after they'd been dating for several months. There's a substance to her that I never saw in Amanda. I see it too, I assured him, genuinely happy for this new chapter in his life. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Our family story didn't follow the path we anticipated, but perhaps it led us exactly where we needed to be, more aware, more authentic, and ultimately more appreciative of the genuine connections we share. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when it's difficult. Protect yourself and your loved ones not just financially, but emotionally. And remember that even after the deepest betrayal, healing and renewal are possible when you face the truth with courage and integrity. Have you ever had to trust your instincts when everyone else thought you were wrong, or found strength you didn't know you had when facing a difficult situation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in navigating life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes our greatest wisdom comes from our most painful experiences.